qTest Quick Setup Guide. Installation and configuration of qTest offline on-premise. Our first step is to create a folder structure for the qTest prerequisites and the qTest components. Create a folder called qTest on the C drive, then open the qTest folder and create two new folders. One called prerequisites for the prerequisites, and the second one called qTest for the qTest components. In the prerequisites folder, create two folders, one for PostgreSQL and the other for ElasticSearch. The next step is to download PostgreSQL, which is used as a database program. You will find the link to the download portal in the comments section. Download the version 11.4 for Windows 86-64. Run the executable file as administrator. As an installation directory, define the previous created PostgreSQL folder. Select Next to continue with the installation. Now you need to select the components which should be installed. Required are PostgreSQL Server, pgadmin4 and command line tools. Since Stack Builder is not required, we will not install this component. Select Next to continue with the installation. Now you must define the directory where the data should be stored. The installer suggests the previous selected path/data. In our case it is c/qtest/prerequisites/PostgreSQL/data. Select Next to continue with the installation. Define a password for the administrator user called Postgres. Select Next to continue with the installation. Select the port number the server should listen on. Since this is the standard port, we will use port 5432. Select Next to continue with the installation. Select the locale to be used by the new database cluster. We will keep it on default. Select Next to continue with the installation. Check the installation summary and select Next to continue with the installation. Select Next to start the installation. After the installation is completed, navigate to the data folder of PostgreSQL and open the pg_hba.conf file. At the end of the file, enter the following information. Type hosts, database all, user all, address 0.0.0.0/0, method md5. Save and close the file. Now we need to check the address Postgre is listening on. Open the PostgreSQL.conf file and check if the value of listen_addresses is a wildcard. The next step is to edit the user variable path. The easiest way to do this is to open the control panel, navigate to System, Security, System, Advanced System Settings, Environment Variables. In the upper user variables section, select Path and click on Edit. In the newly opened window, select New and then on Browse. Navigate to the PostgreSQL installation directory and select the bin folder. Click OK to save the path. We need to add another path to the path variable, so we will click again on New and browse and navigate to PostgreSQL installation directory and select the lib folder. Again, click on OK to save the path. Click OK on the other open windows to save the changes. The next step is to connect to the PostgreSQL server, create the user databases and prepare the databases for qTest. We run the command prompt as administrator. Enter Postgres as the database. The default database is also called Postgres, and the user, which is the default user, is also called Postgres. After pressing enter, enter the password you have defined for the Postgres user during the installation. Now you have successfully connected to the server, create a dedicated user called qTest using the syntax create user bracket username bracket with password bracket password bracket login. In this example, we will call the user qTest app. The qTest user is not allowed to be named as qTest. The username and password should not contain the $, hash or pound, and the question mark symbol. The created user needs the right to create databases. Therefore, we enter alter user bracket username bracket create DB. After we assign the necessary rights to the user, we need to disconnect and connect again to the Postgres DB as the new user. Now we will create the required databases for qTest. We will need one for qTest_manager, qTest_sessions, qTest_parameters, and for qTest_pulse. When the databases are created, we need to connect to each database and create two extensions, and amend the schema, and then define the access privileges. After you've adapted every database, restart the server. After installing and configuring the PostgreSQL server, the next step is to install Java 8. Open the link to the Java download portal and download the Java SE Development Kit 8U212. Be aware that you need an account for that. After downloading Java, run the jdk-8u212-windows-x64.exe file as an administrator. Click Next to start the installation, select Development Tools, and click Next to confirm your selection. After the installation of the JDK is finished, select the path where the JRE should be installed. We will keep the standard path, so it will be installed in the same directory as the JDK. Click Next to start the JRE installation. After the installation has finished, close the window. Now we need to set the Java home environment variable. Therefore, run the command prompt as administrator and enter setx-m space java_home bracket directory where Java is to be installed bracket. To verify the variable was set correctly, open another terminal and run echo space %java_home% and verify the output. The last step before we can install qTest is to install and configure ElasticSearch. Download the zip folder and extract it into the ElasticSearch folder in the c/qtest/prerequisites directory. Next, define another system variable called es_home. So we open the command prompt again as administrator and enter setx-m es_home quotation marks c:\qtest\prerequisites /elasticsearch /elasticsearch-6.6.0 end of quotation marks. Now again, we verify the variable with the command echo %es_home% in a new terminal. Next, change the host address and the port Elasticsearch listens to. Open the %es_home%/config/elasticsearch.yml file. Uncomment the line network.host and enter 0.0.0.0 as the value. Then uncomment the http.port line and define a port for Elasticsearch. The standard value is 9200, but you can define any available port. When the configuration is done, we can install Elasticsearch. Open the command prompt as administrator and navigate to %es_home%/bin directory and start the installation with the command elasticsearch-service.bat install. When the installation is completed, we can start the service with the command elasticsearch-service.bat start. After all the prerequisites are installed and configured, we can now install qTest. Extract the qTest zip folder in the directory c/qtest/qtest. For the qTest configuration, we will use the command prompt. So open it as administrator and navigate to the qTest CTL folder and start the installation with the command qtestctl.bat-offline. At the beginning, you can select the components you want to install. The next step is to connect qTest with PostgreSQL. Enter the hostname or the IP address and the port of your PostgreSQL server. Now we get asked if SSL is enabled for PostgreSQL. In this guide, we will not use SSL at any point, so we enter No. Now we need to enter the username of the previous created PostgreSQL user. In our case, the user is called qTest app. After pressing enter, we need to enter the password. After we have entered the user credentials, we need to define the database for the qTest manager, qTest sessions, qTest parameters, and qTest pulse. qTest and PostgreSQL is now connected, and we can continue with ElasticSearch. Enter the hostname or the IP address of your ElasticSearch server. Since we are not using SSL, we will enter no. The last step for the ElasticSearch configuration is to enter the used port. After configuring ElasticSearch, we can choose if we want to enable SSL for qTest. In this scenario, we do not use SSL. If you want to enable SSL, please have a look into the QA Symphony Help Center. The next step is to configure the qTest components, beginning with the qTest manager. Enter the path where the data should be stored. We will choose c/qtest/qtest, the same directory where the qtest.ctl folder is saved. After this, you need to specify the path for the log files. By default, it is in the previously created manager directory. Now, define the port the manager is listening on. Default port is 8080, which is fine for us. Please check if the selected ports are used or not. The last step for the manager is to enter the URL to access the qTest manager from outside. As we have finished configuring the manager, we can start with session. We must specify the storage type where we are going to store qTest sessions' resource files. Since we want to store them locally, enter disk_storage. Then we must enter the path where we want to save the files. The last step for configuring sessions is to enter the port. Now we start with configuring Insights. So we will enter an available port which Insights is listening on. Then specify the directory to store saved reports and dashboards. For parameters, define the port. To configure launch, specify a port and enter qTest launch's public URL. Do the same for pulse and scenario. Enter the log location for qTest pulse. After you've finished the configuration of qTest, you can start the qTest service using the command qtest.ctl.bat --offline start. This may take a few moments. When the service has successfully started, open the qTest manager in the browser of your choice. The first step is to create the site administrator account. Therefore, enter the required information such as the organization name, the first name of the administrator, last name of administrator, email address, password, etc. When the administrator account has been created, we can configure email notifications. If you do not have this information yet, you can skip this. Now we need to activate qTest. To do so, click on the Import License File button and select the license file which was provided from your Customer Success Manager. Check the license data and click on Save to activate the license. After the license was imported, refresh the page. To connect the qTest components with the manager, navigate to the Configurations tab and enter the public URL for Explorer/Sessions, Parameters, Pulse and Launch. Finally, we need to install qTest as a service. Therefore, press Ctrl+C in the terminal to terminate the process and confirm that termination. Run install.bat to install qTest as a service. This may take a few moments.